Hi folks, Aaron Day here with the third video in our series on how to manage staff. And in this one, I want to share with you some tips on key performance indicators and measures. So far, we've identified the main responsibilities of the role and we've set out all of the tasks. But the next thing we want to do is define the outcomes that we want to see achieved as a result of performing those tasks. And we call those KPIs or key performance indicators. And these are the things that tell us if the job's been done right. So we're not just doing tasks for the sake of it, we're performing tasks so that we can produce the right outcomes. And so we need to define what those critical outcomes are. And to do that, we just need to define what are the statements that tell us this job has been done well. So it helps to break down the key, go back to your responsibilities at the beginning of the role and look at those key responsibilities and think, okay, if this position's responsible for delivering in these areas, what are the outcomes that tell me that it's been done properly? And they need to be positive, present tense, measurable statements. So it needs to be a statement that you can say, that you can tick and say, right, yes, that's done, that's true, that's complete. So for example, if with a sales role, we've got a goal of making 10 sales calls a day, then I've made 10 sales calls a day. That's a pretty clear KPI. Either you have or you haven't. So they're the kinds of measurable statements that we need to see the key performance made up of. We also need to be aware that you can't measure everything. So we split KPIs into two categories, hard and soft KPIs, for want of a better definition. But the soft ones, they're more observational, they're a little more subjective, they're harder to measure in terms of whether or not they're actually being achieved, but everybody's got a fair idea of whether or not they're being achieved because they're still important. So just because you can't measure it specifically, don't think that it's not important and that it shouldn't be listed as a KPI, because KPIs are all about setting the standards for achievement within each of the roles in your business, and they're also part of your discussion agenda. So you need to learn to get comfortable with the idea that it's a discussion point. We may not have a hard measure, but it's still something that's important and we value it, and it needs to be discussed in the review processes. So now we move on though to the hard KPIs. So these are ones we can get specifics. We can put a dollar amount to it, we can put a time to it, we can put a materials cost to it, or an amount of materials, or we can put a percentage or some sort of a number against it. And ideally, these hard measures are coming off of information that the business is already gathering naturally. However, if it's not, if the KPI is important enough, the business needs to find a way to get the measurements around that. So that can be just introducing spreadsheets, it might be having people pay more attention to things and starting to record certain things, and then it's up to management to follow through and make sure that those are recorded and that they start to happen. And what happens with most of these things is once the habits are formed, it's not a drama, but the key is to, once you've decided that's what we need to put in place, stick with it and make sure that it happens. As far as how many KPIs a role should have, it varies from business to business, industry to industry. In general terms, around 5 to 15 tends to be somewhere in there is the sweet spot for the number of KPIs a role should have. Now this is your total combination of hard and soft KPIs. When it comes to the hard KPIs, now the hard KPIs, that's typically where you're going to attach. If there's any kind of incentive scheme or any kind of reward or bonus program, this is where you should be attaching to specifics that you can measure. And with the hard KPIs, typically 2 to 5 generally is enough. Otherwise, it gets too complicated trying to figure out who needs to be rewarded for what. And ultimately, with most roles, there's only around 2 to 5 critical areas, critical factors that you can actually manage in hard terms. And I'd suggest, again, that if you are going to have some sort of formal reward or recognition or financial or points-based incentive scheme, that you attach that to the hard KPIs and leave the soft KPIs as more of a discussion point and a reminder of the critical things that are important. So that's the overview on KPIs and putting them together. I hope that was helpful, and I'll be back with some more tips shortly. Bye for now.